Hello everyone! We are back this week with another video on our series, Barriers to Spiritual Growth. And as we said last week, this is going to be part 2 of our series, and it's about the church.
Yeah, can the church sometimes bring up barriers or obstacles to our spiritual growth?
Right.
That's some kind of subject
It is.
there.
That's what we want to dive into. We had someone respond with a really interesting response.
Very interesting.
So I'm going to read that.
Good.
And we can discuss it.
All right.
He said, one of my biggest barriers to growing closer to God was growing up in a Christian home. I was a preacher's kid, so our life revolved around church. Even though our home and church environments were healthy, I recognized eventually that my entire spiritual life had been built upon a relationship with the church as opposed to a relationship with God.
Wow. That's an interesting statement. Now, you know, Suze, both of us can say that we were raised in Christian homes.
Right.
And in fact, both of us were preacher's kids.
We were.
So what do you think about his statement that his entire spiritual life had been built upon a relationship with the church as opposed to a relationship with God? Is that possible?
I think it is. I think that's a pretty insightful comment, really.
Yeah, I do too.
And I can understand where he's coming from.
I can too. I mean, is it legitimate to say that a person can be active in a church without having a close walk with God?
I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes we think of church as our relationship with God.
I think that may be true.
And maybe we confuse the two.
And they're two different things.
Two different things.
You know, we've said this before, and I've heard this before. It's one thing to be religious, to be active in a church, to go through the motions. But it's another thing entirely to be a spiritual person.
Yes.
Those two are not the same, not
Not the
necessarily the same.
Right.
But now, can't we also say that an active, healthy church life can contribute to a growing relationship with God?
It can.
Yeah.
It can.
It can. But they're not the same.
Okay, Dad, I want to read you the rest of this response.
Okay.
And see what you think. I think this is interesting. He also said, I believe growing up in the church strongly conditioned me to operate out of what I should do to be pleasing to God.
That is interesting. The idea that the church conditions us to believe that activity is the same thing as being closer to God. You know, we're really still talking about the relationship between activity in a church and a relationship with God.
Right.
Now, surely, Susanna, there are activities that go on in the church that draw us
Right.
closer to God.
Right.
Prayer, Bible study, worship, fellowship, serving others. We could go on and on.
Yeah.
So activities can draw us closer to God. But should we think that just because we're active in those things, we are close friends with God? No, they're not the same thing.
They're not the same thing.
What do you think about his comment?
I like this comment. You probably knew that already. I like that he used the word conditioned. I think there's some truth in that. Churches, I think, have trained people to be doing church. Be busy doing church instead of being the church. I think some activities can be good. I do. But I also think that what we should be doing naturally as followers of Jesus, we don't do unless it's put on a church calendar.
Well, that's interesting.
Which
Right.
can lead to a lot of bad side effects, I think.
Yeah. Well, namely, that we will equate the two.
Right.
We'll think that just being busy in the church gives us a relationship with God, and it not
Right.
necessarily does.
That
I mean, it's
that
possible.
is a relationship,
Yeah.
which I don't necessarily think it is.
It's possible for people to go through the motions and never come to know God,
Right.
right?
I'm afraid sometimes too much activity in a church helps Christians just feel very comfortable and safe. It keeps them in the church building instead of going
Going out and
out
serving others.
and just doing other things.
Interesting point. I don't know that I would say the church conditions us to think this way. I don't know that it does.
Okay.
I'm sure it's not intentional.
No, I don't think it is.
But I do think it's easy for us to get lost in activity and we forget why we're doing it.
Yes. I
We
agree
forget
with
the
that.
purpose behind it.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
We can agree with that.
We can agree with that.
Something we can agree on. Well, Suze, let's try to nail down some convictions about what we're talking about on this subject, okay?
Activity versus relationship.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we say, first of all, that participation in church activities is not a bad thing?
Yeah, we can say that.
Yeah. I mean, being active in a church is a good thing.
Yes.
But can't we also say, too, that those activities may not draw us closer to God? I mean, we don't
Yes.
want to equate the two. Being active in a church is not the same thing as having a relationship with God.
Right.
In fact, we may know people who are very religious, but who don't seem to know God.
Right.
And as I said in the post on Monday, we need to be careful about making those judgments, but all of us have probably met people like that,
Right.
who were active in a church, but who did not demonstrate the fruit of the Spirit in their lives.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can we say, number 3, though, that our goal is to draw closer to God? It's not just to be
Definitely.
busy. It's not just to be
Definitely.
active in a church.
Definitely.
It's to mature in our faith. It's to grow in our relationship with God. It's to learn better how to live under His rule.
Mm-hmm.
That's our goal.
Can I give an opinion? One of my opinions here.
Sure.
I like this conversation. I think it's an important conversation because I think this is part of the future of the church. Honestly.
Well, I want to hear what you think about the future of the church.
This is just my opinion.
Okay?
I believe that one of the reasons God created the church was it gives us a place to where we can encounter Him and be transformed by Him.
It's a community that transforms us.
Yes.
Right. Okay?
And I strongly believe that the design and the structure of that church should reflect that.
Okay.
I think the church is a movement. Spiritual movement should be happening. Spiritual growth should be happening. And I think the activities we use just serve as tools for that. And I think too many non-essential activities stifle the spiritual movement.
Okay. I guess you think that there are a few non-essential activities in the church.
Yes, yes I do.
Well, I want to
I
ask.
feel strongly about that.
I won't ask you to identify what those activities are, but that's an interesting thing that you apparently you think some churches are too busy.
I do, and I'm going to be very blunt, and I'm going to say that I think some activities are actually killing the church.
Whoa, that's pretty blunt.
Yes.
You think that people are too busy? That they are involved in too many activities that don't contribute to their spiritual growth? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think so, and I think the church puts on too many activities that aren't necessary, that aren't contributing to spiritual growth, that we're just playing church sometimes is what it feels like.
Wow. Well, I guess that can happen.
It can happen.
Let me ask you this. Do you think what you've just expressed is characteristic of your generation, or is it just you talking? I'm just curious about that. Of course, you can't
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know if I can answer that fully, but I don't think it is just characteristic of my generation. In fact, Bryce and I were just talking with some very close people, and they flat out told us, after going on like 4 weeks of every weekend church activities, they had to take a break. They even had one the following weekend, and they said it's too much. It's too much. We have to take a break.
Okay.
And that is from, an older couple. And so I don't think it goes just for the younger generation.
Interesting. So we've gone from saying that church activity does not necessarily draw us closer to God to saying that there are a lot of church activities that we probably ought to eliminate because we're too busy.
Yes.
Okay.
And they don't line up with the vision and the purpose.
All right.
That's what I think.
Okay.
Activities can be a good thing, but if they don't line up with the vision and purpose, I don't necessarily see the point.
Okay. Well, let's develop
We'll
that
go from
further.
there.
So if our goal is to grow spiritually, I guess we probably ought to ask of just about every activity in the church, what is its purpose? Does this activity actually help us to grow spiritually? Does it draw us closer to God? Because we don't want to be busy just for the sake of being busy.
No, we don't.
Right.
And I fully agree with that. And Dad, sometimes I have heard people say, well, we need to get people involved. We need to get people involved. We need more activities so we can get people involved. And I don't know if there's value in that.
Well, you
I
believe
mean, what
there's
do you think?
you believe there's value in being involved,
Well, I do, but I don't know if activities is the answer to that.
but to create more and more activities just for the sake of getting people involved
Right,
doesn't solve the problem.
right.
Okay. We need to make sure that our activities have a purpose.
People are going to be involved if your activities have a purpose and they're growing spiritually. People are going to be involved.
You know, that reminds me of something we've already said, and that is we always need to ask the question, why?
Yes.
Why do we do what we do? There's no value
Big on
in a
that.
pointless activity.
Right.
It needs to have a purpose.
And would you say this? I think leaders should ask why, but I also think people sitting in the pew should also be asking why.
I do. I do. I mean, you know how I feel. I think people in the pew need to listen to their leaders
Right.
and submit to their leaders' direction. So if the leaders say, you know, we think this is a purposeful activity that will lead us closer to God and will help us to live better under His rule, and we want you all to get involved, I think the people in the pew need to consider that. But I agree with you. I agree with you that every one of us should ask why.
Right.
I mean, each of us should consider why we do what we do.
Right. I agree with that too.
Okay.
But I really think there should be clear communication. That's another thing that I think would help. The activities that we do, are we clearly communicating why we are doing those?
That's a good point.
And they should publicly be communicated in the church over and over again, that we're not doing these activities just to be busy. You know, we are bringing this activity in because we think it will benefit you here, here, and here.
Good.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And it aligns with our vision here, here, and here, and here.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's good. All right. Okay, clear communication. We need to connect the dots. We need to be able to see that activities have a purpose.
Yes.
There's a reason for them.
Right.
Okay. And I guess we could say, too, that it would be okay to curtail a program or an activity that did not have that purpose.
Yeah.
You like that, don't you?
I do. I like it. You can't stay focused if you don't say no to some things.
That's for another day, but that's it. No, that's interesting. You can't stay focused if you're not able to say no.
Yes.
Okay. Not all activities lead to spiritual growth.
No.
And who has time for those activities?
Listen, we
We're
live
busy.
in a complex world, a busy world, and I think that the church should be simple. I don't think it should add to the complexity of our lives.
All right. Well, now that's an interesting thought, too, for another day. Certainly we need to keep the end in view. I mean, our goal is to draw closer to God. If an activity contributes to that end, it's a good thing. But the activity is the means
Right.
to the end.
Right.
The end is that we want to draw closer to God and develop a healthy relationship with Him. We want to keep the main thing the main thing. Okay.
I like that.
All right. Well, we've probably talked enough today.
We probably have.
And by the way, we'd like to know how you feel about this.
Yeah.
I mean,
we would.
we've raised some things today, especially Susanna has raised some points today that we would like to hear from you. Do you agree with some things that we've been saying? Do you tend to see things the same way? Let us know how you feel.
It's a good discussion.
It's a good discussion.
Good discussion. So please hop in on it.
And by the way, in a nutshell, the discussion is activity over relationship. Oh, no. Our relationship with God ought to get the emphasis.
Definitely.
And we don't want to emphasize church activity over the reason for the activity,
Definitely.
which is a relationship with God. Okay.
We'll see you next time.
Good to be with you.